First Iteration podcast. I am Chirag, and with me there's Chans.
Hello.
So today we are going to continue our conversation about test pyramids. We spoke in the previous episodes about this picture, about how a test pyramid should look and why in your entire test suite you want a lot more of unit tests and fewer of the tests on the upper layers of this pyramid. So we've talked about that in a lot of detail in the previous episode. So please do check out our episode about test pyramids if you haven't done already. But in this episode, let's talk about couple of scenarios and how you may approach building the right shape for your test suite in those scenarios. So let's start. So I'm going to throw this scenario at you, Chance, and
hmm
you can share your take on it. So let's say you are starting off on a new team, um, building an app from scratch, um, and so yeah, the team's just assembling together. You've done inception. You are clear about what you need to build. You have like a 3 month clarity about what the team's going to build over the next 3 to 4 months. How do you go about building the shape of your test suite in that case?
Okay, cool. Chirag, sounds like a very dreamy scenario that you are saying that, yeah, we have a visible roadmap into what we have to build for the next 3 months. Looks like we have onboarded the right set of people. Uh, we have made the right choices in terms of the tooling. We are working closely with the business and we are all ready to architect, design, and then write awesome code. And like we were speaking earlier, like in the last episode, it's very important to write clean tests as well, because that's a sign of good software. Because we would need short feedback loops. The whole game about writing good software is ensuring that you don't wait for long, and that's where like the short feedback loops come into picture. So if you look at these different layers of the test pyramid, and if I was a developer or a tech lead on this brand new team about to make the like their possibly like their very first commit, I would consider that as a greenfield app. Like the saying goes, if green as in new and you're writing things afresh, and if we were given a choice, or actually we were responsible for building this test pyramid, so to say, I would recommend and actually steer the team into building out as many unit tests as possible. I think that's a very clear choice. Why do I say this? Like unit tests would actually provide you guardrails to design your application with a contract first mindset, because you're writing the tests first, right? And then you're writing the implementation to pass those tests, and then you continuously refactor while ensuring that your tests are passing. So basically, you're not only building a safety net around your code, wherein every single line of code is protected by ensuring that the expected and actual behavior are matching, but also that you're taking baby steps to tackle complexity. I think that's also a very important part of domain modeling, wherein you're essentially solving real world problems and representing that in the software realm. And without these, like a good safety net, it's very easy to try to run or fly fast and later realize that you have built in accidental complexity, or you have built-in potential dependencies on people, or you have written something that you yourself are unable to understand after a few weeks. So I think unit tests does a great service, that it gives you that safety net to continue making progress without any fear and with full confidence that you will get feedback within seconds. And the second thing is because if not because if you follow good extreme programming practices like test driven development, you're allowing your test to be an outcome, whereas the real benefit you're getting is like solid design as well. That you're ensuring that you're not doing any hard coding, you're not tightly coupling layers. you are actually thinking in terms of acceptance criteria the whole time. So I think that's where unit tests become very powerful, and you can continuously add like I think any number of tests, like we spoke last time. Like even if you have thousands of tests, they will give you feedback within seconds. And that way, yeah, you realize that, like we spoke earlier, along with unit tests, there would be different areas to like verify, and you would need components to come together. So you will write integration tests. Then in this day and world, it's likely that you'll build APIs, so you write API tests. And for very few scenarios, you may want to really have some end-to-end tests. And finally, we like human beings are good at like exploring things and trying to mimic the actual user behavior. So you will still have some level of exploratory or manual tests, but at an absolute minimum. So that way, it like clearly shows if I have to build a app today, then the direction that I'll choose to build this pyramid is from bottom to top.
Right. So you'd build it from bottom to top and, start to build in a lot more of the unit tests first. And then as more stories get developed, some integration tests will appear and a few API tests will appear and so
Mm.
on. And that's how over a couple of months, the whole pyramid will start to show up. But
Yeah,
you will make sure that the shape remains consistent right from day one, that there
yeah,
are a lot more unit tests than integration tests and then API tests. Cool. So yeah, you're building the test pyramid from bottom up in case of greenfield apps.
yeah.
Yeah, that
And then
sounds
Chirag, your
reasonable.
comment sparked one thought in me. Like it's you should be mindful of the shape of the pyramid, and if you see it going into a different shape, like a square or a cupcake, then it's time to refactor the higher order tests. Maybe you have too many end-to-end tests. You have a lot more API tests than you planned earlier, and maybe it's time to push them to lower order so that you will continuously retain the pyramid shape. Yeah, so that's the thought I got.
Right.
Now, thinking further, Chirag, I think it's ideal, it's dreamy to think of a greenfield app, but I feel majority, I don't know the exact percentage, most people work with existing apps. So let me now throw a scenario to you. Let's say you have just joined a team which has been in existence for the last 15 years. It's like happens often. They're part of a very successful product, and they have a large application landscape that they maintain. It has millions of lines of code, like in various technologies. Unfortunately, they never had the time to document any of the flow. So the people are the documentation, and most people have moved on to different roles or to different companies, and they're entirely or mostly dependent on manual testing. They tried their hand at automation testing. They do have some automation tests, but they're very flaky. Now, if you were to join such a team, would you have any recommended test strategy for them?
Yeah. So yeah, as compared to the earlier scenario, which was about greenfield app, what you're describing is a scenario where one's working on a brownfield
Hmm.
system. And yeah, and what you describe sounds familiar, where you're inheriting legacy code base, where some other team has uh, written the code base over time, and now me and like others in my team are now tasked to maintain this further and to add more features to it.
Hmm.
And like you said, the constraints of lack of good documentation, lack of good automation tests uh, are far too familiar in such scenarios where you're inheriting code bases. So yeah, okay. So that's the typical sort of brownfield application scenario. And what I would recommend in that case is to build the test pyramid from top to bottom.
Hmm.
And this might feel odd to start with, because it's the exact opposite way in which how we would, we've said you would do it in case of a new app.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so here you would start from the top. And what do I mean by that? So what it means is that if me and others in the team are fairly new to this application and don't quite understand all the business logic that is encoded in the application existing, already, then one of the best ways to actually understand the app is to exercise the application using exploratory testing techniques,
mm,
sort of using it as a user in different scenarios and using that to understand what the app does under various kinds of scenarios, what are the checks it has, or what are the various conditions in which it behaves differently. So you do some amount of exploratory testing to start building a sense of understanding as developers and tech leads on an existing app that you have inherited. So that's the first step that you would do. Then I would, once I have like a broad understanding of the application's behavior, then I
mm,
would start to craft some of the most important scenarios into automated end-to-end tests. Uh,
yeah.
so if it's like if it's a e-commerce app, for example, then searching for products, adding them to a cart, checking them out, uh, and paying for it, like that kind of thing would become the most important. It'll be one of the most important end-to-end scenario. And so like that, I would pick the most important top five most important scenarios for the users, for the business, and encode that into end-to-end tests.
Mm,
So here, but it's still important to keep the number of these end-to-end tests to be small, and that's why the focus would be on the most important, most business relevant scenarios, and the most sort of happy path scenarios. Things that will happen 80% of the time in the
mm,
application. That's the kind of thing you're looking to, find those five scenarios that cover 80% of the actual real life occurrences on the app. So that's the first thing you would do, which is to build these end-to-end tests. And why this is important is because then that's the fastest way to build a safety net on the most important features of the system, right? So
agree.
by writing those five end-to-end tests, and maybe it only takes a day to identify and write tests for those five scenarios. But basically, by the end of the day, you have confidence that at least the most important scenarios, if they break, you will get quick feedback
Yeah.
when you try to modify the code. So that's the first level of safety net that you can put in place. It's the cheapest to do that, and it's the most high value because it gives you confidence about the most important parts of the system. So
Mm,
similarly, then the next step would be to then think of what are the most important services in this system, and for each of the services, again, what are the most important uh, API calls and scenarios, and amongst them, what are the most important sort of data being exchanged, and so on. And so the next step would be, after writing those few critical end-to-end scenarios, would be to take each of the important services and write a few API tests for each of the again, critical APIs and critical calls within
mm,
each API, and so on. And you move down then to integration tests, and finally, you would come to, when it comes to unit tests, it is almost impossible to write unit tests for code that has been written, that's already been written, right? Whether you've written it or somebody else has written it. Certainly, when somebody else has written it, it's close to impossible to write unit tests. Certainly, it's impossible to write good unit tests,
mm,
because the code, when it's not writ when it's not unit tested while it is being written, it is most likely written in a way such that it's not modular enough to be suitable for unit testing. So I have found it uh, uh, yeah, a fool's journey to try and write unit tests for existing code. It's just not uh, useful to do. Takes too much time and doesn't give you success. So when it comes to unit tests, what I would do is, build the top parts of this pyramid, have certain exploratory tests, guide that to write some end-to-end test, guide that to write some API tests.
Yeah.
And then when it starts coming to a point where we are now churning out new code, or adding new features in the system, each of the new code pieces of code that we are writing, I'd start to write them in a test driven manner, and start to modify existing codes so that I can eke out those parts that are getting modified, and then be able to test them as we are developing them. And so unit tests would start to build uh, piece by piece, part by part, as we fix bugs and as we add small new features or large features into the new system. So in a way, unit test, I would rely on them getting added into the system uh, over time, and
Mm.
much more slowly. Whereas the end-to-end tests and API tests, particularly, I would start to add right in the beginning. So,
Makes
so in
sense.
that way, it might take a while for the application to reach a point. It might take like 6 months or a year for the application to reach a point when it has sufficient unit tests, because it's just too costly to go back to try and write unit tests for all the existing code that had been written
Yeah.
over the last couple of years. So the test suite will remain in a place where it doesn't have sufficient unit tests for the first X months, but slowly the team should start to refactor and work with that legacy code to slowly and but surely start adding more unit tests as they start modifying different parts of the code base. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would do. What do you
Yeah.
think, Chance?
Sounds good, Chirag. I think uh, pragmatically, these systems, though legacy, are very useful and would be used by thousands of customers day to day. And you'll not really have a choice to do any big bang rewrite or refactor in isolation. In a way, it's akin to doing a open heart surgery, right? Like the patient has to live, and you have to manage that. So what you described is a very pragmatic way of writing high value tests at a higher level initially, and you're cognizant of mowing them down based on the opportunities that you have. And you also described like the constraints of the code as well really well. If I had not written unit tests first, my idea of a unit would be very conflated, and possibly it will involve different domains and a lot of classes. So trying to decouple them and wrangling that web initially would be very daunting, because you don't even have a documentation, you don't have expected data, and you have a notion of unknown code. And that way, I think what you described is like a very good strategy. And then, like, eventually you're basically describing how to work effectively with the legacy code. So yeah, thanks, Chirag.
Yeah, and this reminds me of of a scenario that I do, because these ideas that test pyramid and unit tests are important. They are quite well known.
Mm.
Like, I've seen teams fall into the trap of um, believing that they need to have a high test
Ah.
coverage, come what may. And I was in this, one of the applications I had inherited.
Mm.
Where clients sort of came to us, and but before that they were working with some other team for a long time.
Mm.
And in the last year before they came to us, they had given this team directions that you need to improve your code coverage.
Mm.
And and this was like a app that was being developed for like 10 years, and in the last year they were tasked to somehow get code coverage up to 80%.
Mm.
And because the client sort of told them that we'll stop working with you if you can't get your code coverage to be 80% in 6 months time. So 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 they did find a way to get their code coverage up to 80%, which and then but still they kept missing on delivery commitments. They kept sort of
Mm.
reaching points where they would say they are ready to deliver, and then they would find just basic testing would reveal hundreds of bugs literally. And things would be like, 1 day away from go live, and then at go live they would again sort of be 3 months away from go live. So
mm,
that kind of very inconsistent delivery uh, uh, results still showed up for the client even after they had got the vendor to get to 80% code coverage. And so at that point they came to us
mm,
at ThoughtWorks, and they said, hey, can you look into this code base and tell us, what may be going wrong here? Because apparently they are writing good code and they are writing good tests, and we can
mm,
see that their code coverage is 80%. So as we started looking into it, what I realized was that the team, under misconception or pressure or whatever may be the reason, they had just taken existing code and like picked this impossible task of writing unit tests for code that wasn't unit testable at all. So for
mm.
example, they would have methods routinely in the code base that be 500 lines long, or
Wow.
800 lines long, and
Mm,
some of the methods were even 4,000 lines long. And now you're trying to write unit tests for a method that is 500 lines long. And the unit tests themselves then become like 50 lines and 70 lines long.
yeah.
And so we saw some of that. And then we started to notice, as we started reading some of these very large unit tests, we started to notice a very key thing that was missing. Guess what? That most of the tests were missing the assertions completely. So the test went like this, create an
Ah,
object of class A, 10 lines to set up some data so that it doesn't throw a null pointer, then create some object of class B, again,
yeah.
set it up with data, 10 lines to set it up so that it doesn't sort of give index out of bounds and, such exceptions. So like that, you are setting up objects of different classes, and then you just sort of calling methods on each of them. And then, and one of them, must be a really sincere developer in the team who actually wrote a comment saying this test has been added to improve code coverage. and so and so unit tests were then just they were useless, right? Like you
They'll
couldn't
pass all the time,
understand
basically.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would pass all the time. That is one. Second, so it's not giving you any
Code
feedback
coverage
of
is
any
high. Yeah.
sorts. But it makes code coverage high, and it doesn't
Yeah.
give you any benefits of improved safety, or improved understanding of the system, or better documentation. I mean, it gives you nothing, but it ends up wasting a lot of developer time
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
somehow achieve that code coverage number. And sort of somehow, like, if somebody took this pyramid that we've been describing literally, without sort of understanding the context, then they would, yeah, our target is to have 500 times more unit tests than we have end-to-end tests. And but those are, you see my point, right? Like, that is
Yeah.
misled
Yeah.
thinking. In case of brownfield apps, you have, or basically in case of any app, what you have to think of is, what is the cheapest, easiest way for me to get realistic and quick feedback
Mm,
on whether what I'm writing is going to break my existing code or not.
yeah.
And so in case of brownfield apps, the best way to approach it is to approach it bottom from top to bottom.
Yeah.
You still have to make sure that the number of tests that you keep at the top is low,
Mm,
and slowly start to add more unit tests. And like you were describing, in case of greenfield apps, it is just the right thing to do, to write unit tests right from the beginning, and write lots of them, and then slowly and steadily add a few of the integration tests and API tests, and so on, in small numbers over time. So it's important to sort of understand this, because yeah, if people just look at the shape of the test pyramid and take it too literally without sort of understanding the nuances of what how to apply it in their scenarios, then that can lead to bad results. All right. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope that helps. Share with us if you've got experiences of working with greenfield apps and brownfield apps, and tell us how you went about building your test
Yeah.
shape. We'd be keen to hear. And thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. See you later.